reflection of me. The fights became more frequent and more volatile. One night, Emmanuel stayed out late, claiming he was with coworkers. Daphne, suspicious and fed up, checked his phone while he slept. She found messages from Tasha, the same friend who had texted him years ago. Her heart sank as she read the flirty exchange, her worst fears confirmed. The next morning she confronted him. When Daphne confronted Emmanuel about the messages from Tasha, the argument wasn't just a flurry of accusations and defensiveness. It was a reckoning that brought years of buried resentment to the surface. Daphne held up his phone, her voice shaking. "You lied to me. Every time I asked if something was going on, you said I was crazy. You said I was imagining things. Was that a lie too?" "Who's Tasha?" she demanded, holding up his phone. Emmanuel's eyes widened and he reached for the phone, but she pulled it away. "Daph, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" she interrupted, her voice shaking. "You've been texting her for weeks. I'm here raising our kids, and you're out here, what, lining up your next move?" "It's not like that," he insisted, his tone defensive. "She's just a friend. A friend who talks about how much she misses you? Don't insult me, Emmanuel." Emmanuel's shoulders slumped. He sat down heavily on the couch, running a hand over his face. "I didn't lie about us. I didn't cheat. Tasha was just someone to talk to when I couldn't talk to you." Daphne flinched at the words. "You couldn't talk to me? Emmanuel, I've been here. I've been holding this house together while you've been out doing God knows what. How is that not enough?" His gaze was heavy when he looked at her. "Because I'm tired, Daph. Tired of feeling like no matter what I do, it's not good enough. You don't see me. All you see is the man I'm not." The words hit Daphne like a punch to the gut. For the first time she saw the cracks in Emmanuel, not as excuses but as fractures he didn't know how to fix. Still, the betrayal, emotional or not, cut deep. She packed a bag that night, taking Tariq and Amaya to her mother's house in Philadelphia. Emmanuel didn't stop her. At her mother's house, Daphne began to unravel the emotional toll their relationship had taken on her. Her mother, Evelyn, was a sharp-tongued, no-nonsense woman who had always warned Daphne about men like Emmanuel. Men who seemed perfect at first, but crumbled under the weight of responsibility. "I told you, baby girl," Evelyn said, shaking her head, as she bounced Amaya on her hip. "You can't build a house on quicksand." "Ma, please don't start," Daphne replied, her tone exhausted. "I'm just saying, you've got 2 kids to think about. If he can't step up, you better learn to step on without him." But stepping on wasn't that simple. Daphne missed Emmanuel in ways that surprised her. She missed his laugh, the way he always knew how to make Tariq and Amaya giggle, the way he held her when she felt like the world was falling apart. She began to wonder if she'd been too quick to leave, or if she'd been too slow. Daphne also missed the way Emmanuel fucked her and sucked her. He was the best she'd ever had. She sits on her bed, her legs spread wide as she stares at a picture of Emmanuel. Her hand moves between her thighs, fingers slipping beneath the fabric of her panties and disappearing into the hidden folds of her pussy. Her hips buck, and her chest rises and falls with each movement, her eyes fluttering closed in ecstasy. Her hand moved in slow, deliberate movements as she plays with her pussy, her fingers tracing circles and flicking her clit with precision. Her face is flushed, and her eyes are closed, lost in the sensation. Daphne runs her tongue over her lips as she imagines the taste of Emmanuel on her tongue. She can almost taste his skin. Her mouth waters as she imagines her Emmanuel's taste, a combination of salt and musk that drives her wild. She can almost taste him on her lips as she brings her fingers to her mouth, sucking them clean with a moan of pleasure. As her excitement builds, she can taste the salty tang of her own desire on her lips, her mouth watering with anticipation. Daphne's moans grow louder, the sound of her fingers slipping in and out of her wetness, blending with the wet squelch of her own juices. The sound of her pleasure fills the room, a symphony of lust and ecstasy. She moves her fingers with practiced ease, teasing and caressing her swollen clit. She can feel the wetness spreading, coating her fingers and the fabric of her underwear, her body responding eagerly to the touch. Her fingers glide over her slick skin, massaging and teasing her sensitive clit. She shivers at the feeling of her own touch, imagining it to be Emmanuel's tongue. Finally consumed by the thought of Emmanuel's touch, Daphne reached the peak of ecstasy and released a symphony of her own. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Emmanuel was unraveling. The silence was oppressive, each corner of the apartment a reminder of what he'd lost. He tried to stay busy, picking up extra shifts at work, but the weight of Daphne's absence clung to him like a shadow. He started going to the gym, hoping the physical strain would distract him from the emotional pain. Late one night, he scrolled through his phone, lingering on photos of Daphne and the kids, Tyreek's goofy smile, Amaya's chubby cheeks, Daphne's radiant grin at Tyreek's second birthday party. He sent her a text, "I miss you. Please come home." Daphne read the message but didn't reply. After 2 weeks of separation, Emmanuel showed up at Evelyn's house unannounced. His suit was wrinkled and his eyes were bloodshot, but he was determined. "Evelyn, I just need to talk to her," he pleaded, when Daphne's mother opened the door. Evelyn stared him down, arms crossed. "Talk? You had plenty of chances to talk, Emmanuel. What makes this time different?" "I'm ready to fix things," he said, "for her, for the kids, for us." Daphne appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Ma, it's okay," she said softly, stepping outside. They sat on the stoop, the cool evening air heavy with tension. "I want to be better," Emmanuel said, breaking the silence. "I'm not perfect, but I'm trying, Daph. I'm trying for us." Daphne sighed, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "Trying isn't enough, Manny. We've been trying for years, and look where it got us." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Then let me do more than try. Let me prove it to you, to the kids. Just give me another chance." She looked at him, her heart torn between hope and fear. "This is your last chance, Manny. If you mess this up, we're done." The road to reconciliation was far from easy. They started with therapy, a step that neither of them had considered before. Sitting in a small office with a soft-spoken therapist named Miss Robbins, they unpacked years of unspoken pain and resentment. Emmanuel admitted to feeling overwhelmed by the pressure to provide, while Daphne confessed to feeling neglected and undervalued. The sessions were emotionally draining but also cathartic, helping them find common ground they hadn't shared in years. They also committed to spending more time together as a family. Emmanuel started taking weekends off to be with Daphne and the kids, planning small outings like picnics at the park or trips to the aquarium. One rainy evening, they stayed in and built a blanket fort with Tariq and Amaya, laughing as they told silly stories by flashlight. Daphne watched as Emmanuel lifted Tariq onto his shoulders, the sight warming her heart. "This is all I ever wanted," she thought to herself. Just as things began to stabilize, life threw them another curveball. Emmanuel was laid off from one of his jobs, leaving the family in financial strain. The stress reignited old tensions, threatening to undo the progress they'd made. But this time, they faced the challenge as a team. Daphne stepped up, taking on more clients in her event planning business. Emmanuel, humbled but determined, took on a part-time gig while searching for a new full-time position. Their perseverance paid off. By the end of the year, Emmanuel found a new job and Daphne's business began to thrive. They celebrated their victories together, toasting with glasses of sparkling cider at the kitchen table. Years later, Emmanuel and Daphne stood on the same Camden waterfront where they'd shared one of their first dates. Tyreek, now in elementary school, ran ahead with Amaya chasing after him. Emmanuel wrapped an arm around Daphne, pulling her close. "We've been through hell, haven't we?" She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Yeah, but we made it out together." Again, their love wasn't perfect, but it was real, built on scars, laughter, and a commitment to keep fighting for each other, no matter what. By now, even Emmanuel's family had noticed the changes. So when the 4th of July rolled around, Emmanuel's mother insisted they come over to her house for a family barbecue. Daphne threw herself into the preparations, determined to make it perfect. The day was bright and warm, the yard filled with folding chairs, colorful balloons, and the aroma of ribs on the grill. Family and friends mingled, playing dominoes, sharing jokes, and passing plates of food. Even Maurice showed up. "Yo, Manny," Maurice called from across the yard. "Get over here. Your team's about to lose this cornhole game." Emmanuel chuckled, shaking his head. "You wish," he said, joining the game. Meanwhile, Daphne sat with Emmanuel's mother and sisters, laughing and chatting. They teased her about her peach cobbler, saying it was the best dessert they'd had all year. As the day wound down and the sun set, Daphne and Emmanuel found a quiet moment alone on the porch, watching the fireworks light up the night sky and sharing a bottle of Hennessy. "You know," Emmanuel said, his arm draped around her shoulders, "we've come a long way." Daphne leaned into him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We have, and I don't take a single moment for granted." Emmanuel kissed her forehead, a quiet reassurance that, despite everything, they were stronger than ever. In the distance, Tariq and Amaya chased each other with sparklers, their laughter ringing out over the crackle of fireworks. Emmanuel's mom had took the kids up to her room to go to bed. Daphne and Emmanuel were in no condition to drive home. So they stayed. Maurice and Emmanuel's older brother ended up staying as well. The four of them left the porch and went down to the entertainment room. They watched TV and talked about everything. Laughs and jokes were shared between them. It was late and the entertainment room was dark. Save for the soft glow of the TV playing reruns, no one was watching. The air smelled faintly of liquor, sweat, and the remnants of the night's laughter. Daphne, Emmanuel, Maurice, and Emmanuel's older brother had spent the evening drinking, joking, and reminiscing about old times. Everyone had fallen asleep where they sat. Daphne stirred slightly, shifting on the couch, half asleep and a little buzzed. She felt warm, strong hands trailing up her thighs, gliding over her back, and then resting gently on her breast. Her body tensed for a moment, but her foggy mind dismissed the oddity. Emmanuel must be feeling me up in his sleep again, she thought, a lazy smirk forming on her lips. The touch grew more insistent, igniting sparks along her skin. She felt herself being turned on, lips pressing against hers in a slow, lingering kiss. Her body responded before her mind could catch up, leaning into the touch, her hands gripping at the figure above her. But something felt off. The lips weren't Emmanuel's. The taste wasn't familiar. Her eyes flew open, and there in the dim light was Maurice. Her heart dropped. "Oh my God." She broke the kiss briefly, her breathing ragged, and whispered, "Maurice, what are you doing?" But instead of stopping, Maurice whispered back, "He's asleep, Daph. He won't know." Her mind screamed at her to stop, to end this madness. "This is my boyfriend's best friend." But her body, clouded and confused, didn't move. The heat between them surged, and this time the contact was more intense. Daphne felt herself slipping further, a mixture of guilt and desire swirling within her. This is wrong, she thought. I don't even like him. But she didn't stop. Maurice's hands moved to the waistband of her sweatpants, pulling them halfway down. His fingers explored her insides, drawing out sensations that made her gasp softly, careful not to wake anyone else in the room. She bit her lip, her head tilting back in a moment of weakness. Then a rustling sound broke through the haze. Emmanuel stirred, sitting up on the couch, groggy and confused. The blood drained from Daphne's face as she shoved Maurice away. They both scrambled to fix themselves, but it was too late. Emmanuel's eyes moved from Daphne to Maurice and back again, his expression shifting from confusion to clarity, then finally to devastation. "What the fuck?" he said, his voice low but trembling with rage. "Emmanuel, Daphne started, her voice cracking. But before she could finish, Emmanuel stood, his fists clenched. In one swift motion, he punched Maurice square in the face, sending him crashing into a folding chair. The sound was deafening, jolting Emmanuel's older brother awake. "What's going on?" Emmanuel's brother asked, disoriented and alarmed. But Emmanuel wasn't listening. He stormed toward the door, his body radiating fury and heartbreak. Daphne ran after him, tears streaming down her face. She blocked the doorway, grabbing him and pulling him into a desperate hug. "Please, Manny, don't leave. I'm sorry. I love you. It was a mistake." He didn't respond. His body was limp in her arms, his face blank. The man she loved, the man she had betrayed, was gone, emotionally shattered. "Bro, what happened?" his brother asked, stepping closer. But Emmanuel said nothing. Slowly he pried Daphne's arms off him, moved her aside, and walked out of the door. "No, Manny, please," she screamed, collapsing against the wall as the sound of his car starting and pulling away echoed in her ears. Her sobs filled the room as she sank to the floor, clutching her knees. "I fucked up," she whispered, the words tumbling out over and over again. Maurice, groaning, stood and adjusted the chair he had fallen on. "Damn," he muttered. Daphne's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face contorted with rage. "Damn? That's all you have to fucking say?" she shouted. "You caused this, and all you can say is damn?" "Yo, you let me," Maurice said, his tone flat. "You wanted it just as much as I did." "Wanted it," she repeated. "I don't even like you. I never even thought of you that way." "Well," Maurice said with a smirk, "you did tonight." Without another word, he walked out of the room, leaving Daphne to crumble under the weight of her actions. For the next hour, she called Emmanuel repeatedly, but every call went straight to voicemail. Despair consumed her as she realized she might have lost the one person she truly loved. The weeks following the betrayal were dark and quiet. Emmanuel stayed away, visiting his brother's house, while Daphne was left to confront the wreckage of their relationship. She found herself unable to eat, sleep, or focus. The guilt consumed her, and she barely had the strength to care for the children. Each unanswered call to Emmanuel made her feel more hollow. After a month, Emmanuel finally returned home, not out of forgiveness but for the sake of their children. They coexisted in the same house, but the silence between them was deafening. Tyreek and their baby girl, Amaya, were too young to understand what was going on, but even they could sense the tension. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, Daphne worked up the courage to speak. "Manny," she started, her voice shaking, "I know I hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me easily, but I want to fix this. For us, for the kids. Please, can we at least try therapy again?" Emmanuel looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally he spoke. "I'll go," he said, his tone even, "but not for you. For the kids." Daphne took that as a small victory. Their first therapy session was awkward and tense. Emmanuel kept his answers short, his body language closed off. Daphne poured out her guilt and remorse, her voice cracking with every confession. I betrayed the man I love, she said tearfully, and I don't know how to make it right. The therapist, a warm but firm woman named Dr. Parker, guided them through the process. Healing isn't instant, she told them. It takes time, effort, and honesty from both of you. Are you both willing to put in the work? Emmanuel nodded reluctantly. I'm willing to try, but I'm not making any promises. Session after session, they unpacked years of buried emotions. Emmanuel's feelings of neglect, him stepping out and talking with Tasha, Daphne's loneliness, their shared struggles with communication, and their reliance on alcohol to cope with stress. Over time, Emmanuel began to soften. He admitted how much he missed the closeness they once had, the way Daphne used to light up his world. Daphne worked hard to rebuild his trust, going above and beyond to show her commitment. At home, they started spending more time as a family. Emmanuel cut back on his drinking, and Daphne poured out every bottle of liquor in the house. They began having game nights with the kids, cooking dinners together, and even sneaking in date nights. Slowly, the cracks in their relationship began to mend. By the time Amaya turned 8 and Tariq was 9, life had found a new rhythm. Emmanuel and Daphne's love had been rebuilt stronger than ever. Therapy had taught them how to communicate, and they worked hard every day to maintain their bond. The kids flourished. Tariq excelled in football, while Amaya loved ballet. Emmanuel and Daphne were proud parents, cheering from the sidelines and attending every recital and game. They made a point to always show up for their kids, ensuring they never felt the instability that once plagued their home. Their home was warm and full of laughter again. The walls, once silent and heavy with tension, now echoed with the sound of Tariq and Amaya playing, the aroma of Daphne's cooking, and Emmanuel's deep, hearty laugh. Emmanuel and Daphne had found a groove that worked for them, a balance of love, trust, and mutual effort. But something kept tugging at both of them, something they hadn't fully explored during their years together. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Daphne sat on the couch with Emmanuel, their fingers intertwined. She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. Do you ever think about how much we've changed? She asked softly. Emmanuel nodded, his eyes fixed on the flickering TV. Yeah, I think about it all the time. Feels like we've been through it all, huh? Daphne smiled faintly. We have. But you know what I realized? Everything I went through, everything we went through, was tied to us reflecting each other. Emmanuel turned to her, intrigued. What do you mean? She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. When we first got together, I think we didn't really understand how connected we were. Like, when you were struggling, I was struggling. When I was happy, you were happy. It's like we're mirrors for each other. And back then, we didn't know how to handle that reflection. Emmanuel leaned back, considering her words. You're right. I see it now. When I was out drinking and acting wild, you started doing the same. When I shut you out, you shut me out. And when you cheated, well, I guess that was a reflection of me not being there for you and getting involved with Tasha. Daphne's eyes welled up with tears. And when I felt like I wasn't enough for you, it was because I could see you felt like you weren't enough for yourself. Emmanuel reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek. I get it now. We weren't just hurting ourselves. We were hurting each other. Every bad choice we made, every argument, every mistake. It wasn't just about us as individuals. It was about what we were showing each other. Daphne nodded, her voice trembling. But it's not just the bad stuff, Manny. Look at us now. When you started working on yourself, I started working on myself. When you loved me better, I loved you better. When you became a better father, I became a better mother. We're still mirrors, but now we reflect the good things. Emmanuel pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. You're right, and that's why we've got to keep it up. We've got to be good for each other, because whatever I am, you'll see it. And whatever you are, I'll see it. If I want the best from you, I've got to give you the best of me. Daphne buried her face in his chest, her heart swelling with love. I'll keep being your mirror, Manny, and I'll keep working to make sure their reflection is something we're both proud of. This newfound understanding brought a fresh intimacy to their relationship. They began having deeper conversations about their goals, fears, and dreams, and the sex they had was more passionate than ever. Emmanuel opened up about his struggles growing up in Trenton, how he'd always felt like he had to prove himself to everyone. Daphne shared her insecurities, admitting how hard it was to feel worthy after some of the mistakes she'd made. They started supporting each other in new ways. Emmanuel began encouraging Daphne to pursue her dream of opening a small catering business, something she'd always talked about but never had the confidence to do. Daphne, in turn, pushed Emmanuel to cut ties with negative influences in his life, including some old drinking buddies who didn't respect the changes he'd made. Together they became a team in every sense of the word. The following summer they decided to go back to the mountains for another family vacation. This time Daphne's catering business had taken off, and Emmanuel had been promoted at work. Their family had grown even closer, and they wanted to celebrate their hard-earned peace. This trip wasn't just about fun, it was a chance to reflect on how far they'd come. As they packed their bags and loaded the kids into the car, Tariq and Amaya were buzzing with excitement. At the Airbnb, they hosted a cookout that brought both sides of the family together again. This time the atmosphere was light and joyful, without the lingering tension of unresolved issues. They played board games, swam in the pool, and shared stories late into the night. Emmanuel and Daphne couldn't help but smile as they watched their kids laughing with their cousins, knowing that their hard work had created this happy, stable environment. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Emmanuel and Daphne sat on the porch, watching their children chase fireflies. You know, Emmanuel said, taking a sip of his drink, we're not just mirrors for each other, we're mirrors for them too. Daphne nodded, her eyes soft. And that's why we've got to keep reflecting the best of ourselves. Emmanuel took her hand, his gaze steady. We will. For them, for us, for everything we've built. The trip ended on a high note, and when they returned home, life continued to flourish. Their relationship wasn't perfect. No relationship ever is. But they faced their challenges together, armed with the understanding that they were reflections of each other. On their anniversary, Emmanuel surprised Daphne with a vow renewal ceremony in their backyard. Surrounded by family and friends, they reaffirmed their commitment to each other, promising to keep growing, keep loving, and keep reflecting the best of themselves. As they danced under the stars that night, Emmanuel whispered in Daphne's ear, We've been through hell and back, but I wouldn't change a thing. You're my mirror, my partner, my everything. Daphne smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. And you're mine, Manny, always. The years ahead would bring new challenges, but they faced them with open hearts, knowing that together they could weather anything, because when a man and a woman truly commit to each other, they become mirrors, not just reflecting who they are, but who they have the potential to be.